Welcome to the Foul Play YouTube channel.
Hey everyone, welcome, past listeners, new listeners. Welcome to our podcast. It's really great to be here. My name is Dr. Silkman, and
Welcome to the Foul
the
Play
title
YouTube
of our
channel.
podcast for now is Let's Follow the Evidence. Now, in our previous podcast, we've sort of built up a picture of where we are at the case at the moment. And we have some really good, exciting news. The following podcasts are going to be looking at the trials of both Brendan, the trials of both Stephen. And what we're going to be doing is looking at the main players that were in the trial. And we're going to be examining their testimonies, and we're going to be examining the forensic evidence as well. And joining us on our panel tonight or this morning, wherever you are, is Bibi, Big Jeff, Holly C, Lily, who'll be on chat looking at the questions, Milbilly, and Zoe. And guys, first of all, I'd like to thank everyone for coming to our channel, our Foul Play channel. We've got, I think, over 200 subscribers so far, which is fantastic. And all of us, the whole team, would like to thank you very much for your support and for your comments. And if I could just do a little plug, please check out Milbilly's excellent YouTube channel. He has done a phenomenal amount of great work looking at the new photographs that have just been released, and also the chatter, the police chatter, the law enforcement chatter, which is turning out to be, there's a lot of gold nuggets there. Okay, guys, welcome all. Now, if you remember from, before we start the podcast, I'd just like to mention something extremely significant which took place earlier this week, and that's the filing done by Kathleen Zellner. And we're not going to spend too much time on that because there's been a lot of excellent reviews and presentations done by many YouTubers, and feel free to have a look at their work. It's all magnificent. Essentially, with the new filing, the only thing I could really say is that the new filing is extremely comprehensive. Here we have Kathleen Zellner with both barrels firing, and it really covers many aspects of the case. It looks at witnesses, it looks at Ken Kratz, the way he behaved, but most importantly, guys, she looks at all the forensic evidence and really breaks it down, and it's extremely powerful. The only thing I could suggest, guys, if you want the official Bible on this case, apart from MAM 1 and MAM 2, this filing has got the lot. It goes into a lot of detail, especially about the forensic evidence that was used against Stephen. It breaks it down. It presents an alternative theory and hypotheses, but also it introduces her own team of experts. Basically, Stephen never had these experts during his trial. Well, now the series of experts have examined all aspects of the case and completely broken it down. And all I can say is God bless Kathleen Zellner and her team. Stephen is a very lucky man to have her services, and all she needs is her day in court. And I'm sure all of us will agree. We would love to see Ken Kratz sweat on the stand. Guys, if I could just ask my panel, what do you think about that? Would we love to see Ken Kratz sweat on the panel, on the stand? Big Jeff.
No, I wouldn't like to see that. I'd like to hear about it.
Yes.
But I think I wouldn't be surprised if Zellner still has some aces in the hole, if you will, because remember, she did ask for a page extension that was denied.
Yes, yes, yes. BB.
Oh, yeah, I wish there was a way. I would love to see him and her go head to head, Kratz and Zellner. They
Yes.
could make a pay-per-view
Oh,
on
yes.
that.
I'll
I would pay
definitely
to
be into
see that.
that.
Yes.
Beautiful. Look, I agree with you, Big Jeff. I believe that not all her cards have been shown. You see, guys, everything is now happening all over again. We have the $100,000 reward for information that can lead to the killer or killers. We now have magically Ken Kratz appearing on YouTube with his absolute garbage posts and comments. And we've got guilters appearing everywhere. And I spent, probably several hours arguing with guilters, and I had most of my comments deleted. So it's interesting. We are at a very pivotal point in the case. And guys, I'm honored to have you all online sharing this experience with us. Okay, guys, before we start, do we have any comments from our panel? Big Jeff.
I can't resist making comments. I apologize for that. So
No, not at all.
I'd like to summarize Ken Kratz's YouTube channel for people.
Yes.
First he says you shouldn't have been coerced by a documentary because a documentary only offers a small snippet into space. So here's
Yes.
my 5-minute video that says why you should be a guilter.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Which you shouldn't be coerced by a short snippet of time. But here's my 5-minute video.
Yes, yes, very
So
much.
Thank you for the logic, Ken.
Yes, yes. Anyone else have a comment? BB.
Well, and his videos are also heavily edited, which is
Yes.
what he accuses the television show, as they call it, of doing.
Yeah, yeah. Guys, I really want to make the comment that if you're really serious, if you're a serious student of this case, my recommendation is always to go to the original literature. Have a look what people have actually said in a court of law. Anything outside a court of law is just hearsay. You're wasting your time. When it's done in front of a judge, a jury, it's serious. And yes, there is a lot of reading to do. So, guys, that's the main purpose of the podcast, to illustrate what we have found. And so the podcast that we do is really a springboard for you guys to do research into various aspects and bring your questions. We love to have them. Okay, guys, we'll make a start. If we have a look at slide 93, this is where we ended up last time. Stephen, of course, was put in prison. He was arrested. And you can see that, look, it doesn't affect just Stephen. It really does affect the family as well. And it's very heartbreaking when you see his mother just showing up a lot of the hate mail that he had, that their family had received. The way Ken Kratz did his presentations, media reports, he painted Stephen in a very, very bad light. And of course, that's going to have an incredible effect on their business. They lost a lot of business. People no longer called the Avery salvage yard. They called other salvage yards instead. So their businesses suffered. And look at all the hate mail that they got. And the other thing, of course, if I could just make the comment, Stephen had 5 children, I believe, including twin boys. And it has had a devastating effect on the family because some of his children do not talk to him. And of course, some of his children have also got children of their own. And all they'll know is that their grandfather or father is serving life in prison for horrendous crimes. Guys, do we have any comments about that? In other words, it affects everyone, inner and outer circle of a family. It has destroyed family and friends. Guys, do we have any comments? Okay, We're all good. Okay, so we can now really start the official podcast. And if we have a look at slide 94, we can see that on the table, Stephen Avery had around $400,000 sitting waiting for him, no matter what took place in the civil lawsuit. Now, of course, having attorneys is not cheap. It cost $160,000 for his attorneys that were involved in the civil lawsuit. So it wasn't cheap. Now, that meant that Stephen Avery only had $240,000 left. Now, remarkably, once Stephen got arrested, well, lo and behold, the civil lawsuit disappeared, right? So the civil lawsuit he had with the county was gone. And if I could just read this, in exchange for payment, Manitowoc County does not admit fault or liability. And this is truly remarkable because that $400,000 had nothing to do with the civil lawsuit. It was to do with his wrongful conviction, where he had spent now 18 years in prison. He was sentenced, I think, for 32 years, but I believe it was 6 or 8 years that he had to serve for his assault on his own cousin. So he was in prison for an additional, I think, 12 years. And because of that, because of the wrongful imprisonment, he was awarded $400,000. But the civil lawsuit disappeared. Guys, do we have any questions? Bibi.
I'm not sure if it's everyone or if it's just me, but you seem to be cutting out in a few words here and there.
Oh, can you hear me now?
I can hear you. It's just a word every once in a while. It might
Okay.
be me.
I don't hear that. I hear you fine.
Okay. All right.
You hear fine? Beautiful.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So, guys, do we have any questions in regards to that 400,000? You can see that his 400,000 started to dwindle pretty quickly. Millbilly, do you have a question?
I always found it odd that they set his bail above what he was going to be getting.
Yes. Yes. In fact, didn't his bail kept on going up and up? So it's pretty clear. And also, is it true that they did not want property as part of the bail bond? Millbilly.
Yeah, that's true. The family tried putting up their land in Crivets and
Yes.
the Avery salvage yard as collateral or down payment to get him out, and they denied everything.
Yes. Millbilly, if I could just say, you're sounding superb tonight. Did you get a new microphone?
I did indeed.
Very nice indeed. Now, is it also true that the Halbach family was also suing Stephen Avery for his $400,000? Has anyone got a Millbilly?
Yes. The strange thing about that is the Halbachs decided to drop the case, but Judge Flowers, as everybody likes to call her,
Yes.
was persuading the family to keep it going.
Yes. Well, if they did, Stephen Avery would have had $0, potentially have $0 to defend himself.
But just think, let's say they had the civil suit goes through and they find him not guilty.
Yes.
Well, what would that have done to his criminal case?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So, yeah, it's remarkable. The Halbach family was going to sue him for the money that he had in his possession. And that could have made things extremely awkward for him. Okay.
And you also got to remember that her brother was the attorney in charge of the case.
Yes. 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 Bibi, do you have a comment?
Well, just that it's kind of funny that they were suing him before he was even found guilty. So,
yes.
Once again, guilty before found innocent or guilty. Yeah.
There's no question about that. Big Jeff, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Millbilly. That would be Tim Halbach was the lawyer.
Yes, that was the lawyer, Tim.
Tim.
His
Tim.
Yep,
older brother.
that's correct.
Okay. All right. Well, Bibi, do you have a comment, or we're good to
Oh,
go?
sorry, slow. Yeah, I know. I got.
No worries. Thank you. Well, of course, the dropping of the civil lawsuit was catastrophic, but it was catastrophic for Stephen and his family. However, the remarkable thing is, if we go to slide 95, well, if we look at the timing, now remember, this timing is remarkable when one considers that prior to Teresa Halbach disappearing, the sheriff, Tom Kosarik, and the DA, Vogel, were going to be deposed in the oncoming week. Because Stephen was arrested, there were background wheelings and dealings, and the civil lawsuit was dropped. Now, what is remarkable, I didn't even have to say anything, but when the camera crew were videotaping Kosarik, he was smiling and beaming like a 2-year-old. He absolutely knew that he had dodged a bullet. So neither the sheriff nor the DA got to be deposed, and the civil lawsuit evaporated just like that. A Big Jeff, do you have a comment?
Did you ever hear the expression that he looks like the cat that ate the canary?
Yeah. Yeah.
he
Yeah.
does in that picture to me.
Yes, and the remarkable thing is, I don't think he knew the camera was rolling, because the moment the reporter shoved the microphone in his face, he turned serious, like, yep. So, it's remarkable just getting the guy's attitude. He was beaming, he was smiling, he was laughing, because he knew that he got himself out of a very bad situation, both him and the DA. Guys, do we have any comments? Holly C.
Was it him that requested not to be deposed? Was he the one trying to fight being deposed to begin with, or was that Peterson?
That's a very good question. Who's got an answer to that one?
I can tell you that Peterson was deposed.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know whether or not Kosarik and Vogel were saying that they shouldn't be. I would expect that they were all somehow
yes,
legally opposing it.
Yes. Yeah, I would say that many tried to wrangle their way out of it. And, when one considers the shenanigans that took place, there's no doubt that Kosarik and the DA, Vogel, were going to be in big, big trouble. But remember, in our previous podcast, we looked at the timing of events. Truly remarkable that Teresa Halbach goes missing just before Kosarik and Vogel are about to be deposed. It could be a fluke, or I don't know, but it is pretty remarkable. But yes, I could imagine that both of them would have been extremely happy. Millbilly, do you have a comment?
I find it highly suspect that the day they arrest Stephen Avery,
Yes.
Vogel requests Peg Laudenschlager's phone number.
Right.
The very next day, Kokurik's deposition is canceled.
Yes.
The day after that, we have Dennis Jacobs calling Queso Dispatch, requesting to talk to Wiegert or Pagel because he just talked to his neighbor, Tom Kokurik.
Yes. Yeah.
Coincidence? I think not.
Yeah. Look, there's no doubt that there would have been a lot of very secret meetings and discussions. And look, guys, we have to look no further than the 1985 sexual assault against Penny, when Pagel wrote her report and found no fault to anyone except she pointed the finger at the victim herself. You know that things are pretty rotten if that situation came up. So there's no doubt that everyone was extremely happy. everything went according to plan, and the civil lawsuit disappeared. And it really put Stephen in a very, very bad position. Big Jeff, do you have a comment?
Yeah, when we invoke Peg L's name, we have to remember one of the things that it helps to remember is that one
Yes.
of the DCI investigators that Peg L had help her write her famous whitewash report was a woman by
Yep.
the name of Deb Strauss.
Oh,
And if you
jeepers.
only tune in to Millbilly's channel, you can listen to the phone call where Deb Strauss calls Calumet or Manitowoc, I forget which one, out of nowhere and says, I'm no fan of Stephen Avery, and I'd like to offer my assistance. I'm not even sure if it's legal, but whatever my office can do, I'll be glad to help. Why did she make that call? You think was she in this for Peg? Was she helping Peg out to make sure that this went down the way Peg wanted it to go? Very strange.
She calls in
Hillbilly.
the night before a car is found on Avery's.
Right. Yep. I mean, this looks like a very coordinated process that took place. And Deb Strauss was actually meant to be investigating all the shenanigans that took place. And here we have an investigator apparently offering her services because she had a dislike for Stephen Avery. The universal dislike for Stephen was just unbelievable. Guys, do we have any comments about that?
Well,
Big Jeff or Millbilly.
Well, there was over 30 people deposed in his lawsuit.
Yes. Yeah,
and
it was
who
huge.
knows who else may be brought into this after Kukurik and Vogel talked, but we will never
Correct. No, we won't. Big Jeff, did you have a comment about that?
I just wanted to amplify Millbilly's comment that Deb Strauss calls in and offers her services against Stephen Avery, whose name just keeps on coming up prior to the RAV even being discovered, and effectively making him a strong suspect.
Yeah. Look, guys, I think we've been in this case long enough to realize that if a frame job was being set up, you had to have everyone on the same page and everyone had to be ready. And it appears that you've got all this background chatter before anything major is found. They're already pointing the finger at one person and one person only. And that's truly remarkable because it tends to suggest a conspiracy on a big grand scale. And you can see bits and pieces of that conspiracy against Stephen over a long period of time. So this is nothing new, nothing surprising. Bibi, did you have a comment?
Just on the convenience of everything. It's always just so conveniently timed for them. It's definitely gone on for a long period of time. It always happens that way for them.
Yes. It just seems that you've got this almost a universal, unilateral hatred for Stephen. And let's just think about this, right? And Millbilly made the excellent point that there are a lot of people being deposed. Most of those people being deposed were from the MTSO. So I don't believe anyone from the MTSO had any love for the man, which meant that if some type of setup or frame up was out there ready to put into place, I don't think you would have had any opposition at all. They would have all been very, very glad to go along with it. Guys, is that too controversial? Millbilly, what do you think?
Well, just the fact that when they find the RAV on Avery's property, when they talk to Link, his first statement is, well, if the car's there, she's got to be there somewhere. And then Jacobs finds out, his first comment is, well, do we have Stephen Avery in custody?
Yep.
Like, she's still a missing person.
Yes.
It went from a missing person all the way to a death investigation before they had any proof that she was even dead or anything. Because there's no report of blood being found in the car while it's on the property. It's not till it gets to the crime lab. The next day.
That is correct. That is correct. In fact, Big Jeff, do you have a comment?
To keep on following it on, as a matter of fact, you said, well, you might be inclined to say, well, maybe they didn't even look in the RAV to see if there was blood in there. before they took it out. But we know that's not the case because they may not have opened the doors, but they probably shine their flashlights in there. But what we know, we have the interview with Mike Halbach where he says, we're relieved that there's no sign of foul play seen in the car.
Big Jeff, you want to say that again? There was no indication of
foul play.
Foul play. We go again. That is an excellent point. Millbilly, do you have a comment?
One of the officers says that he looked into the car and he's seen a scan disc with Teresa's name on it. Now,
Correct.
if you can read the name on a little disc card, you think you'd see the blood in the car too?
Correct. And this guys is an extreme concern because we have some shenanigans going on here. Let me explain. Both Pam of God and her daughter Nicole, they're the ones that found the RAV4 in the Avery salvage yard. And it was very interesting that in the pre-trial, they were asked very vigorously, did you see any blood in the RAV? Right? They were asked blunt, did you see any blood in the RAV? And they refused to answer the question, and there was a lot of interjections as well. Essentially, they blamed the weather, they blamed the sky, they blamed that it was dark, but you know what the ultimate proof was? The ultimate proof that they were lying were the photographs that Nicole actually took. It's clear, there's plenty of sunlight, and as Millbilly alluded to, you can see straight through the window. Millbilly, do you have a comment?
Well, they found the car at, 10:30 in the morning?
Correct.
So
Correct.
They had amount of hours of daylight.
Yes.
To take pictures, but they start taking pictures when it gets dark out.
Yes, there were. There's only, what is frustrating, and I think you guys will admit, there's only a limited number of photographs taken of that RAV4 in situ. Now, Pam and Nicole, I believe it was Nicole, took 6 photographs. And as you can see, it was pretty well daylight. Now, one thing to note, guys, is that Pam Sturm herself is a private investigator with a bit 9 or 10 years of experience. The front of the RAV, the glass was clear, which meant that she was able to see water bottles, right? Water bottles in the car and other bits and pieces. Being a private investigator, she would have definitely looked at the ignition to see if the key had actually still been in there. Well, we know that that famous spots of blood are right next to the ignition key. Not one of them, neither Pam Sturm nor Nicole Sturm, mention any blood. Millbilly.
I want to know on these new batch of photos that we got, why is there no photo of the rear tailgate? There's no photos of that alleged blood mark on the passenger rear door frame.
Yes.
Why are there no pictures from the passenger side of the vehicle except for that squeeze up shot?
Yeah. Look, I can't answer your question, Millbilly, but I must admit, this is the most bizarre, strangest forensic analysis case I've ever read about. Just going back on the RAV. So we have the 2 people that find the RAV, obviously are very concerned about Teresa. They would have checked inside that RAV meticulously. They never reported seeing any blood whatsoever. But here's the remarkable thing. Fassbender and other law enforcement officers with torches looked inside the RAV very, very carefully. Not one of them mentioned seeing blood. And this is a worry because there is blood in the back cargo area of the RAV4. Now, that's pretty difficult to miss. Furthermore, the comment was made that the CD case, which was sitting in the passenger seat, 50% of it was covered in a smear of blood. So the evidence tends to suggest there's no blood in that RAV4 in the Avery salvage yard. Guys, would you agree with that assessment?
How could you not?
Yeah.
No, it's yeah.
Yeah. It truly is a remarkable thing. Now, let's think about this. If you're trying to make a point of something terrible has happened in that car, you would announce it immediately that, oh, look, we've seen blood, we've seen this. And please don't tell me that the law enforcement guys didn't have the facilities and means to forensically examine the car where it was. All they had to do was build a makeshift tent, protect it from the rain, and you do what you normally do in an investigation.
And you can see that DCI was there with the car before it was removed.
Yes. In fact, I called the crime lab as well. The crime lab people were called. BB.
Well, they also had the mobile crime unit out there, correct?
Yes, they did.
So isn't that what it's for?
Well, at first they had just the Manitowoc's command unit there. They didn't bring Calumet's until the day after because
okay.
Wally Waldorf calls asking, did somebody take our crime lab for a joyride because it's gone? So obviously they didn't even notify him that they're using it.
Yep. Now, what is interesting, guys, is that Remaker and others are inside Stephen Avery's trailer getting blood swabs, right? It's all in queso. So they're already inside Stephen's trailer obtaining blood swabs on the same day that the RAV4 is found, and they took blood swabs from everywhere. Now, so if we look at this, neither Pam, Nicole, and several law enforcement officers with torches note any signs of blood. And it's pretty obvious that the RAV4, all the doors were locked. Nicole Sturm apparently used either her sleeve or tissues, and she tried all the doors. The doors were locked. Now, remarkably, no one had the foresight to open the door of the RAV4 while it was under the tarp, or did they? We don't know because they covered the whole RAV with tarps. Millbilly, do you have a comment?
Well, when it gets to the crime lab, the door's unlocked.
Yes. Big Jeff, do you have a comment?
I don't, excuse me. I'd also like to point out some of the excellent investigative work that's been done by a Redditor named Henberry, who's also the one that FOIA'd all the photos that we have recently, and he's got some great articles on about the RAV and the impossibility of how you could not have moved that RAV. They could not have disconnected the drive shaft the way that they said it, the way that they said they did. They couldn't have done it with the front drive shaft. It would have had to have been the rear drive shaft. Or they would have had to go into the car to put the car in neutral to be able to tow it. And it's just completely impugns the testimony of Erdl as to how that RAV was moved to the Wisconsin Crime Lab.
Yes. BB, do you have a comment?
Yes. Also, when it's under the tarp on one of the flyovers, you do see what does appear to be people under the tarp with the car.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, but sorry, Millbilly first. Do you have a comment?
Well, as pertaining to the flyover, they were in the air for 4 hours. But like Zellner states in her brief, we only have 3 minutes of video.
Well, yeah. Yes, a very good point. In my opinion, and it's only an opinion, I'm speculating here, I reckon that the flyover was to find a spot to place the RAV. When you're up in the air, you have excellent three-dimensional views, 360 views. You can see all the particular side roads that can lead to the salvage yard. Millbilly, do you have a comment?
Well, I don't know if the viewers have seen Stephen Avery's interview. The same day they did Earl's and Chuck's and Barb's and all them.
Mm-hmm.
I find it very strange that they tell Stephen We know the car came through the deer camp. We know how the car got on it. So
Look, Millbilly just hit on one of the most important points that I've ever read or heard. It's in the November the 9th interview where both Wiegert and Fassbender are hammering into Stephen. And can you believe that both Wiegert and Fassbender say to Stephen, we even know how the car got on the yard? And what's remarkable, I'll tell you guys, what is remarkable is that it did not come from the way Brendan said it came. So, of course, at that stage, they didn't know anything about Brendan, which is remarkable. They said the car, the RAV4, had come from Cuss Road, Deer Camp, back roadway, and parked at the pit. So therefore, Fassbender let out an important point that no one else knew. And guess what? The Brendan told the complete opposite story of how him and Uncle Steve drove the RAV4 from Stephen's place to the pit, which meant that something is not right. Guys, do we have a comment? Thank you, Millbilly, for that. Thank you.
By Chuck,
Big Jeff.
by Chuck's house. Drove it by Chuck's house. That's how, just in case people are wondering how he said. Through the yard by Chucky's house.
Yeah.
It's like Brendan's case and Stephen's case are completely different.
That's correct. So in effect, we've got two parallel universes, two murders, but done in different ways. I've never seen anything like it in my life. Holly C, did you have a comment?
Yes, remember, Radon also said that they told him that the car came in back from the deer camp and up through. That was omitted out. They actually knew that on the first days of the investigation.
Excellent point, Holly C. Excellent point.
And on the on the 7th, the morning of the 7th, Josh Radon signs into the property around 7:30 a.m. Mm-hmm. He states when he comes back around 11, they got his property taped off.
Yes.
They got his burn barrel taped off.
Yes.
And why are they saying that he's okay to come through as soon as he gets there? Let him in.
Yes, that's right. That is exactly correct. And, when you start looking at all these little snippets, they knew where the RAV4 came from, and it wasn't from Stephen's garage. And what is remarkable, they told Stephen during that interview something that they should have kept to themselves. Because remember, at that early stage, they knew nothing about Brendan. When they were interrogating Brendan, and they basically asked him, all right, how did you and Stephen get the RAV to where it was found? Can you believe they drove the RAV, both him and Stephen drove the RAV, right, past Brendan's home, past the mother's home, and past Chucky's home to drive to the pit, and no one saw or heard a thing. That is in complete contradiction to what Fassbender and Wiegert told Stephen as early as November the 9th, which is remarkable. Guys, do we have any comments? Holly C.
One thing I want to say too is that I'm so glad that Ryan had told them that the lot was broken before, because they didn't think to ask Brendan how they broke the lot.
Yes. Oh, no question about it. If you are to analyze Brendan's confessions, which I have and other researchers have, you can see that it completely falls apart. of what he actually says has any credence at all. And I can't believe that the investigators did not know that. They must have known. Millbilly, a comment.
Well, I've been thinking about the duration of time that took place between Brendan's first interview
Yes.
and when he's interviewed prior to March 1st in Fox Hills.
Yes.
I think he had to have heard somebody talking between that time. Because
Yes.
he knows things. Parts of his interview, he says things without them leading him, but other parts, he is guessing 100%.
Yes. No question. Yes, I do believe you're correct, Millbilly. Remember, he lives in the Dassey household, and Lord knows what he could have overheard other people talking in the household or at other places. But it's remarkable that what he was saying about the RAV4 could not have been true. And mind you, the Wiegert and Fassbender did not pull him up on that. They just basically let him tell his story. And it could not have been true. I mean, when you think about it, where the RAV4 was found is the complete polar opposite side of where where Stephen's trailer was. So think about it, guys. They drove the RAV4 past the crusher. So if they were going to have a time to crush the car, it would have been then and there. Because once you park the car, it's very, very hard to get that vehicle out from where it was. Millbilly, do you have a comment?
Stephen even says in his November month interview, if I would just crushed it and been done with it.
Yeah, correct. He told them straight. He told the investigators that if he had done the crime, that car was gone. Right now, remember, if they drove the car on October the 31st, it wasn't found to the 5th. So think about this. Remember, his family's still working and going around the salvage yard, and the RAV4 was found with all types of tree branches and hoods and all bits and pieces. Don't you think that would have stood out? And Millbilly, correct me if I'm wrong, but during Earl's interview, didn't he say that he was down the pit area and never saw that RAV?
He claims that he was only there on Wednesday, and that's when Fabian was there, and that's when we went rabbit hunting, and that was the last time he was in that area. But I don't see how he can forget that he was down there Friday afternoon with Stephen Avery sighting in his gun right by
Correct.
the crusher. So this is 4 days later, so he's got a very selective memory.
Big Jeff.
Speaking of selective memory, I wonder if Millbilly could inform us how the interview with Earl Avery that we have heard on his YouTube channel lasts about 45 minutes or so. How's that documented in the castle?
Oh, it's not. They claim they only gave him the warrant to get his DNA.
And that he wouldn't talk, right?
Yeah.
So that was 45 minutes of him not talking.
Yeah. Well, his interview is actually 2 hours long.
Right. BB, do you have a comment?
One thing.
Oh, sorry, Millbilly.
When
Yes.
they're, I don't know if people listen, it's hard to hear because when they're driving to the hospital, the wind and everything. But you hear them say, "It's a good thing you were hiding yesterday because we had somebody with us yesterday that's not here today, and this works out better for you this way."
Oh no.
Like, what the fuck?
Yes. BB.
Yes, and also wasn't Earl and Chuck down there also pulling out trees to transplant or something?
No, Earl removed the trees, and then him and Fabian went and retrieved them.
Yeah.
And what day was that supposed to be on?
That's the thing. Earl claims that all this happens on Wednesday. Well, from my research,
busy that day.
Everybody states at one time that there was a fire on the 31st.
Yes.
Stephen was burning Redon's brush.
Brush, correct.
Stephen states in his interview where the brush piles were. And how is Earl hunting brush piles on Wednesday when they were burned on Monday?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, guys, if you go into the reports, CASO, some of the transcripts, you'll see that there are a lot of inconsistencies, and it's truly remarkable. Now, remember, Stephen was in prison for a very long period of time. A lot of law enforcement officers descended on the Avery salvage yard. Both Chuck and Earl would have been very, very nervous indeed. But just a point on what Bibi said. Well, one of the investigators who found the RAV4, who was at the RAV4, noted that there were fresh trees that had their roots still on them, that were on the RAV4. Well, Earl just admitted that he ripped out a series of trees. Guys, is there a connection here? Bibi.
Possibly why he was hiding under the dirty laundry.
Yeah, it must have been a big pile for sure. Millbilly.
Yeah, that had to be a big pile.
Yeah,
That's
Millbilly.
a lot of dirty laundry.
Correct.
It just, the queso's a bunch of lies.
Yeah, you have to be careful. You're correct. You have to be careful. But when they did find the RAV4, they did find trees that had their roots still attached. And it's rather remarkable. Who on earth is going to pull out a tree and put it next to a car to try and hide it? So the only person who admitted pulling out trees was Earl Millbilly.
Well, there's also a dispatch call that comes in about somebody saying they should look at Earl.
Right.
And have they search his property. He was just planting trees on his property.
Yep.
So that statement is verified. He did pull trees out. He did take them to his property. He did replant them.
Yes.
So we don't know how many trees he pulled. We didn't know if he left some there.
Yes.
But
yes, big Jeff. Big Jeff, do you have a comment?
I do. October is not the time you transplant trees unless you want them to die. Sorry.
Right. Yeah, very, very interesting indeed. But I think, guys, we'll all agree that whoever tried to disguise the RAV really wasn't trying to disguise the RAV. If you look at it, the RAV was there like a beacon. It's so obvious that you can see that anybody walking past that RAV would have easily found it. And the remarkable thing is, Pam of God found it within about 20-25 minutes, no problems at all. Bibi, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I think it's more like a neon sign with all the garbage and debris on it. And you still had the big tire cover back there that says, "Look at me, I'm right here, RAV4." Yeah.
Yeah, remarkable.
So clearly, if you were going to try and hide it, you'd take that off. Yeah.
Millbilly, do you have a comment?
Well, Pam Strom calls that morning around 6:30 a.m. stating that she just seen the report on the news that they're going to be searching, and she wants to know where they're going to be searching, but a dispatcher informs her she has no clue.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we have gone through this before, and I realize that we must move on, but there's something remarkable going on. I mean, when they went up on the plane on the 4th, the pilot was also he was also looking out for the RAV, and they flew everywhere around the salvage yard, around the area. They apparently could not see the RAV. But the people in the plane who were up there with him, they never said a word, right? So we don't know whether they saw a RAV, didn't see a RAV. This is on the 4th, but it would have made perfect sense if you're going to plant something from the air, you can actually tell the best spot to find it. Now, here's the remarkable thing, right? You've got Ryan Hilligus, who is an ex-boyfriend of Teresa Halbach. Ryan Hilligus is friends with Scott Blodorn, who is living in the same house as Teresa Halbach. You've got Pam of God, who arrives late for the search party, and Pam of God just happens to be Teresa's cousin. You've got Scott and Ryan giving Pam of God a map of the Avery salvage yard, and also a camera and a phone number for Sheriff Pagel. Now, the interesting thing is that none of them gave these items to anybody else. Lo and behold, Pam, her daughter, go to the Avery salvage yard, and who lets them in? Millbilly, you want to tell us who let them in? Who let the girls in? Who was at the salvage yard that let them in?
Well, that was Earl's weekend.
Yeah.
To wash the yard because him and Chuck rotated. And Earl states he let a bunch of people in.
Yes.
And there was also people coming there to buy. They were still running their business as normal. Like nothing happened.
Correct. That is correct. So the ladies actually asked Earl permission if they can search the salvage yard. And Earl told them that there were other searchers who had come in. So that's very interesting. So he never precluded them. He just welcomed them. Yeah, go for it. And of course, we know the story. Within 20 to 25 minutes, Pam found the RAV4. Guys, do we have any comments?
She found a RAV4.
Yes, I call it the Pam of God RAV4 because you know that she rang up Sheriff Pagel and she was rather shocked. It's pretty obvious if you read the testimony because she said
she tries calling their personal numbers but doesn't goes right to their voicemail. She then calls dispatch and Pagel and them happen to be there.
Yes. And you can hear in her voice, she goes, "Oh, but the vehicle is blue-green." And all the missing girl posters are for Teresa. It all says dark green. So that actually stumped Pam. She was expecting to find a dark green RAV, not a blue one. So the RAV4 that she found, I refer to it as the Pam of God RAV because there looks like there could be some shenanigans going on, potentially with multiple RAVs. Does anyone agree with me, or does everyone think there's only one RAV? What are your comments, guys?
Me, personally, I think there's two.
Two? Yep. Big Jeff?
I just can't believe that Karen Halbach would get the color of that car wrong. I just can't get past that. Also, let's remember that Pam of God, during the pretrial testimony, could not remember that it was a four-door RAV.
Or a two-door. Yep. Correct. BB?
I definitely have to say that, in my opinion, there's at least two.
Yeah. I think that there are at least two RAVs. I never thought I would say this, but I think there's the. I know. There's definitely the Pam of God RAV, and there's also the State Crime Lab RAV. There's something definitely funny going on here, guys. All right. Now, do we have any other additional comments, or can we continue? And don't worry, guys, who are listening. We will go over a lot of the evidence pieces again. So we'll revisit all of that because if you watch Ma'am tends to isolate between various pieces of evidence. They talk about something, leave it, then come back to it. We'll do that too. All right. So guys, if we have a look at slide 96, Now, Stephen appointed both Dean Strang and Jerry Buting to defend him, and I'll read it out for our listeners. In late February, Stephen uses the money from his settlement to hire defense lawyers Dean Strang and Jerry Buting, and they came highly recommended from his civil lawsuit lawyers. So, guys, was this a good or bad assignment? What do you think? Tell me. Who's got a comment? That's both Dean and Jerry. Were they good, ultimately good for Stephen, or ultimately bad? What do you think? BB.
Nah, you know me.
Well,
I
go ahead.
Yeah, BB.
I think Jerry Buting is Peg's boy.
Yep.
I can't get past it. Go ahead, Mobley.
Yep,
Well,
Billy.
if you look at her briefing, they admit they fucked up.
Yes, they did. They did. My personal opinion of both of them, I don't think they knew what they were landing in. This was one very unusual case. There was a lot of legal blocking that was going on by Ken Kratz and his crew. And Ken Kratz was basically able to hobble the defense in many aspects, including the Denny. A lot of things went wrong. And also, I believe he manipulated the judge as well, because a lot of very important points always seem to go with the state. BB, do you have a comment?
Well, and that whole gentleman's agreement. Oh my God. Yeah.
Yeah, we actually won't go there because it's unbelievably upsetting. What BB is talking about, guys, is the gentleman's agreement. Are you talking about the pap smear?
Well, yeah, and there was a few other things rolled into
Yes.
that, like her vibrator and what part of the whitewashing of her where she's the perfect
Yeah,
saint. Yeah. But yes,
correct.
the gentleman's agreement. Yes.
Yeah, the gentleman's agreements basically meant that the lawyers got together, the attorneys got together, and hence witnesses and paperwork didn't need to be brought forward because they all agreed upon it. Now, guys, I want to tell you this. If there was no pap smear, there would be no case because there would be no standard to compare anything to. So I find it remarkable that the Dean and Jerry didn't insist to see the proper paperwork on that pap smear, because if one couldn't be produced, then you have blood, saliva, you can't actually match it to anybody. And everything was matched to the pap smear. Big Jeff, do you have a comment?
Yeah, it's a little bit out of sequence, but we had a question from the.
Of course.
So I'm going to read it from Joanne Cooney. Wasn't Jerry Buting involved with PEG to put together PEG's law? So I think what she's referring to is the fact that, does anyone know who actually trained Wiegert and Fassbender and some others on the use of the Reed technique? Does anybody want to make that guess?
Oh, no.
Go ahead.
Yep.
It was.
Jerry Buting. Buting. Oh, yes, it was Buting. So, they all know each other and they all associate with each other. But to me, both Dean and Jerry, I think they did a good job, but only up to a certain point. They didn't go far enough, and they made a couple of fatal mistakes, and that was they didn't understand the use of experts. What they needed was a blood splatter expert and a DNA expert. Would have made a big difference. Zoe.
I think they trusted the state too much. They just thought Kratz was playing fair, and they trusted him too much. I think if they knew back then Kratz's intentions better, they would do a totally different work.
Yeah, to me there was a lack of aggression from either Dean or Jerry. What you did find that occurred all the time was Ken Kratz used to have a lot of hissy fits, and he would stamp his feet, and he would let the judge know about if either Jerry or Dean overstepped the mark. Billy, do you have a comment?
The question is, who is the one that appointed Kratz as special prosecutor?
Well, I know that the sitting DA basically talked to Ken Kratz to make him the prosecutor in the case. But do you know anything more, Billy? I think it was Mark Rohr.
Yep, Mark Rohr.
Yep.
Mark Rohr was there, Griesbach was there, and then Kratz shows up.
Correct. In actual fact, guys, Ken Kratz was on the Avery salvage yard on the 5th. He was there, right? And so was another DA. Just about everyone showed up on the 5th. The place basically got invaded, and there were at least 2 DAs that were present on the Avery salvage yard. Now, remember, this was a missing persons case. Big Jeff, do you have a comment?
Just thought it was a missing person case. You hit it right in the head. That's what can you point to any other missing person cases where that army of people descends on a not even known to be a crime scene, but discovery of a potential key piece of evidence?
Yeah, it is quite staggering. I know I've made this comparison before, but I keep looking at the Christine Rudy case, which that poor lady met the same fate as what Teresa Halbach did. And I don't recall any type of response like this. And remember, that poor lady was 6 months pregnant. She was left on the side of the road during winter, and there certainly wasn't this kerfuffle looking for her. Bibi, do you have a question?
Well, yeah, it was winter, and she was poorly dressed also.
Yes.
When she was supposedly let out of the car. Yeah, and nothing. Oh, well. Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, I know it's a different county, but still.
Yeah, but nothing of the response that we saw with Teresa. Now, look, every human life is important. Don't get me wrong. But if you have a response like this for every missing person, there'll be nobody left in the office. Everyone will be out looking for missing.
And they go broke. Everywhere go broke. Yeah.
Correct. That's absolutely correct. All right. So, guys, let's move on to slide 97. This is where things really took a big turn, and that was a press conference that was done on March the 1st. Now, if you have a look at this picture here, you've got Pagel, Kratz, you've got Fassbender and Wiegert. And if you look at Fassbender and Wiegert, they look completely exhausted. And the reason for that is because they've just interviewed poor Brendan Dassey for, I think it was a total of around about 6 hours altogether. Guys, does anyone have any comments about that? Yep, everything's good. Yeah, they interviewed Brendan, and don't worry, guys, we'll come back and we'll talk about Brendan Dassey and his interrogation sessions because they're very, very important. But essentially, Ken Kratz and Pagel basically gave out some hints as to what has been found. This is directly after Brendan Dassey had confessed on March the 1st, and he was interrogated for a long period of time on March the 1st, and that's when things went catastrophically wrong for Brendan Dassey. So, note, at this stage of the investigation, there was no forensic evidence backing up anything that Brendan said. However, it didn't stop both Ken Kratz and Pagel to have their press conference. Guys, do we have any comments about the very first press conference? Any questions? Yes, Big Jeff.
It has been cited as possible prosecutorial misconduct and poisoning the jury pool. I'm surprised Zellner didn't bring it up in her brief.
Yes, and it got even worse on March the 2nd. So this was only a preliminary press conference, but then we have the infamous press conference on March the 2nd. Now, if we have a look on slide 98, everything that you can think of that went wrong for Brendan Dassey, who was a 16-year-old child at the time, it happened here. And Brendan Dassey was interrogated by both Wiegert and Fassbender. And if you read the confession or if you hear the confession, it is extremely painful to go through. Basically, what they're doing here, and you can see Mark Wiegert putting his hands on Brendan Dassey. This is your classic read technique, where essentially the law enforcement officers interrogating you basically give you two options, like a get out, but none of those options are good. Big Jeff, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I was just curious as to whether Brendan's lawyer, Len Kaczynski, is he just out of the frame there? Is that why you can't see him?
Well, guys, we know the tragedy here. Brendan Dassey was by himself.
Yes.
His mother didn't come in till after the interview was concluded, and the court did not see the end part of the tape. So you can see here Brendan cradled, he's got his hands in his head, and he basically told his mum, "They got to my head." Now, if you go through the interview, it's very long, but it's definitely worth reading and watching. You can actually see what Fassbender and Wiegert say and do to Brendan. And Brendan's got a relatively low IQ and is very susceptible to suggestibility. Guys, would you agree? Millbilly, do you have a comment?
As for the actual video of his interview, it's broken into 3 parts, but part 1 is missing 46 minutes of video.
Yes.
So whoever originally uploaded those 3 parts was guilty.
Right, that's about right. Yeah, I must admit, I'm more of a fan of going through the testimony itself, reading it, analyzing it, and what you'll find is that Millbilly, a comment.
Well, the problem with reading testimony and then reports is they don't match at all.
Yeah.
Like you got officers saying one thing happens, but then in trial, a completely different scenario takes place.
Correct. A lot of the police officers, when they interview someone, they'll write it up from their perspective. They try to be unbiased as possible, but they'll put in a different spin. Furthermore, in a lot of cases, they leave pertinent information out. So in that case, you don't get a full perspective. But by having a read of his interrogation, you can see that the conversation was mainly one-sided, mainly coming from Fassbender and Wiegert. Brendan clearly was out of his league. He had no idea what was going on, and he basically admitted to everything that they were telling him. Millbilly, do you have a comment?
Well, investigators had a problem when they went back to the Averys because there's about 6-7 inches of snow everywhere. So they only had 2 options, the house or the garage.
Yep.
Both are lies.
Yes. Holly C., do you have a comment?
I do. First of all, we have to realize when O'Neill interviews him the day after, he gets him to say that he sees Teresa. So when we know that that didn't happen, so they know that he can be swayed in his statements. They can suggest him.
And O'Neill gives them 2 different scenarios, and both are him partaking.
Correct.
And then they have, not to skip over and maybe we'll be going into that. But he had the other interviews at school that we do not
Yes.
know what was told to him or what he said. And then we have the
Yes.
Fox Hills.
Fox Hills. Yes.
Yeah. So we
Yep.
have no idea what they already had planted in his head
Yes.
before
Yes.
this interview took place.
Yes. Big Jeff, do you have? Thank you, Holly C. Big Jeff, do you have a comment?
Yeah, those are outstanding comments by Holly. But what
Yes.
I wanted to point out that we love to point out Wiegert and Fassbender as the villains that they are. There's also two other villains who should not escape our scrutiny. One of those is Len Kaczynski,
Yes.
who is recently, a sex offender himself. Recently had to serve time in prison for a violation of a restraining order.
Yes.
And secondly is the investigator that Kaczynski hired.
Don't say the name.
Mike O'Kelly.
Oh God!
You know how I get revved up.
Yes.
I think I'm going to have to do a read of the testimony of Brendan's interview with Mike. It is unbelievable.
It's a shocker.
Someone who is supposed to be working in the interest of Brendan convinced him to do it, and it's just so obvious that he was an agent of the state in this case, and not an agent of the person he was supposed to be working for. It is just criminal. Criminal.
That is correct. Bibi, do you have a comment?
Yes, to elaborate on something Holly had said.
Yes.
They knew because they had talked to Brendan's school. So I'm sure they've seen his IEP reports. And it says right in there how he's easily suggestible and how he's not real verbal. And so they knew from the start that he was malleable, or that they could twist him easier.
Yes. Yes. Holly C., do you have a comment?
I do. Remember also, they were trying to get Jody in that very room to turn on Steve. They needed, at this point, they only had a circumstantial case against Steve.
Correct.
And so they had to have somebody corroborate that it was Stephen, because they knew if they went to trial, everybody would think, well, maybe it was planted and he had a chance to get off. With Brendan, seals the deal for them.
That is correct. That is correct. And Brendan, his so-called confession, in inverted commas, had a devastating effect. Of course, when Brendan went to trial, he recanted everything. And both him and his cousin Kayla, Kayla was also a child at the time, and that caused a lot of issues for Brendan as well. And so for both Brendan and for Stephen. But here we have the classic sign. If we look at slide 98 again, we've got someone who's completely broken to pieces. And that's what the read technique does. I've seen the read technique in action in other things like the Central Park 5. It is horrendous. Lily, do you have a comment?
Well, Ben is wanting to know if it is custom to have the same investigators investigate both of the co-defendants.
Yeah, because it was their crime scene. They're lead investigators, so they're in charge.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, because we're dealing with the same victim per se. So it would have made sense, because that way they can compare notes, etc., etc. So yeah, we've got this tragic situation, and you guys have already alluded to it, in that Brendan was alone. All the trouble for Brendan started with the interview with O'Neill, and with O'Neill, it proved that Brendan was malleable. Brendan initially stated that 1, he never saw Teresa, he never saw his uncle, he never saw the RAV4. Then, unbelievably, we have Skorlinski telling O'Neill outside the car about the bus driver, and that the bus driver had seen a woman photographer taking pictures of cars. As soon as this took place, O'Neill questioned Brendan and said, hey, wait a minute, the whole busload of students that were with you and also the bus driver saw a woman photographer taking pictures. How come you didn't see it? And slowly what happens is that Brendan slowly came around and said, oh, yeah, that's right. I saw her drive out. And then he changed his story again. He said, oh, yeah, that's right. I saw Uncle Steve, Teresa, well, obviously the woman photographer, down by his trailer, and she took pictures. So notice, during that interview, he went from denying, he told the truth the first time, he saw nothing, to seeing the car drive out, to actually then seeing Teresa and Stephen together. But there's one problem. He got off the bus at 3:45. Teresa arrived at about 2:45, which means how do you explain what Teresa's doing with Stephen Avery for 1 hour? So hence, that completely screwed the timeline. But there's one thing that we have forgotten. Brendan was not alone when he got off the bus. He was with his brother, Blaine. And both of them walked down the dirt driveway and went to their respective home. The interesting thing is that Blaine, Brendan's brother, was questioned by Skolinski in a hotel with the presence of his mother. Blaine told Skolinski, nope, I didn't see anything. Did not see anything, did not hear anything. Me and my brother got off the bus, went home. That's exactly what Brendan said to O'Neill the very first time. But O'Neill was able to manipulate Brendan and make him change his story. Guys, that was the beginning of the end for Brendan. Guys, do we have any comments? We're all good? Holly C, do you agree with that?
I do. And the other thing, at the first of this video, the first thing they say, now be honest this time.
Yes.
Be honest this time. So he must not have been telling them exactly what they wanted before.
Correct. And Bibi, do you have a comment?
Well, and there's also that discussion where they say, I know we got a little rough with you last time or something, but there's not going to be, we're just going to talk this time. It's not going to. So what the hell are they alluding to there? And nobody's going to get up in your face this time. So what the hell went on off camera or on camera that they can't let us see? That's so buried, locked in somebody's safe or in their underwear drawer at home all these years that they can't let us see.
Yes.
The fact that they state that the Fox Hills incident wasn't recorded, I call bullshit, because in the beginning of the March 1st interview, when they walk in the room, you hear Figure say, okay, we're just going to turn this off. They recorded because we got the room already recording.
Yes.
Because you can hear in the beginning, before they walk in a room, everything that Brendan does is amplified and echoes.
Yes. Yep. No question about that. No question about that. Fox Hills is a bit of a black hole. And we all know, both myself and another investigator by the name of Bron, we did a video presentation in regarding Brendan's coerced confession, where the major points that he makes during his coercion were taken directly from a film called Kiss the Girls. And it's pretty well remarkable what he was telling the investigators to what happened within the film. And here's the irony. Fox Hill, where he was staying at with Fassbender and Wiegert, they've got cable TV, and they probably were watching, they may have been watching Kiss the Girls. Now, how ironical is that? Because the investigators kept on telling Brendan, okay, play back the video in your head. So it was like he was recalling a story that he had seen. And if you pattern match what he told the investigators to the major themes of Kiss the Girls, it is 100% spot on. You couldn't make it up. It's 100% identical. Guys, do we have any comments? Big Jeff.
Sorry, Jeff.
Jeff, you have to speak up a little bit. Oh, we've lost Big Jeff. See if he comes back. Big Jeff, do you have a comment?
I just wondered if we could post a link to that presentation in the chat, because it really does go through it in great detail.
Yeah. In our Foul Play server channel, we've got 11 presentations that myself and I also collaborated with another researcher, Bron, where we look at the forensic aspects of the case. But I've also got a personal interest in Brendan. So I've done several presentations with Brendan. I recommend, guys, if you haven't seen them, please have a look and see what you're thinking and ask questions away, because it's very, very important in this case. Lily. Lily, do we have a question?
Oh, yes. I did put it in the server here. Did BD watch
Oh, good.
Move? Yep.
Oh, good.
Thank
you. Thank you so much. Okay, lovely. So, guys, we better move on, because we're never going to finish this. But thank you, guys. A fantastic panel with so much wisdom and knowledge. But if we have a look at slide 99, I just want to show you the utter contrast between Ken Kratz and Pagel. Look at this, right? We're talking about an investigation of a brutal murder that took place, and you've got a smiling, cocky Ken Kratz, right? And on the right-hand side, you've got the mother of Brendan. And Brendan just confessed to doing all these things with his uncle to Teresa Halbach. And so the contrast there was severe. You've got a devastated mother who basically left her son to the wolves, because Fassbender and Wiegert, they're very experienced investigators that use the Reed technique. And then on the left-hand side, you've got a real smug Ken Kratz pointing his finger, wanting the press to ask him questions. It was just the show was all for him. Guys, do we have any comments? Let's try and keep swearing to a minimum. Millbilly, do you have a comment?
Just that whole press conference was garbage. I still can't believe he did it. And they got to stick to that case now. His first statements, they had no choice.
Yes, they did. Yes. Bibi, do you have a comment?
Just the puddles of blood in the back of the RAV under the seat.
Yeah. This is going to come back to bite, because the state have basically locked themselves into a scenario. Well, actually, two scenarios. They're not quite sure exactly where the murder took place, whether the murder took place inside the trailer or whether it took place inside the garage. And both Brendan and Stephen were put on trial separately. And in Stephen's trial, Brendan wasn't called up. So there's a lot of funny stuff going on here. But during the press conferences, we've got all sorts of accusations going on. We've got massive pools of blood everywhere. Yet, of course, when the RAV was spotted and found on the Avery salvage yard, no one saw any blood. So there's some real funny business going on here for sure. Guys, any comments? Who's got a comment? Okay, so guys, let's move on now to what I consider to be a simply staggering series of events, and that is the March the 2nd press conference. Now, don't forget that Brendan, the day prior, had admitted to all these things that both him and his uncle had done to Teresa, and it was horrendous. And Brendan basically gave a narrative in which he heard yelling and screaming. and that he eventually knocked on Stephen's trailer, and Stephen came to the front door all sweating. Because remember, Ken Kratz kept on mentioning sweat, sweat, sweat. And then he saw Teresa Halbach shackled to a bed with her arms and with her legs, and that she wasn't gagged. She was, begging Brendan, to stop his uncle from doing these horrible things. And don't forget, the Dassey household was just about 100 feet away from Stephen's, so they were in pretty close proximity. Furthermore, the mother, the father, and the two brothers could have come in at any time to see Stephen. So even though he was in his trailer, he wasn't alone. Someone could have come in at any stage, right? So he describes this horrendous scene whereby his uncle invites him to rape Teresa, right? I mean, I don't have to go into the details because they're just too upsetting. And remember, apparently Teresa was shackled to a bed. So Stephen Avery had raped her. He invites Brendan Dassey to rape her. Then they start cutting her throat, stabbing her in the stomach, cutting her hair, strangling her, all these horrible, horrendous things. Then they leave the room and they have a discussion of what they want to do next, right? So this is what Brendan was telling the investigators. Then they decide that they were going to take her to the garage. What do they do in the garage? According to what Brendan said, they shot her 10 or 11 times. Then they load her up into the RAV4. Then they take her out of the RAV4. What are they going to do? Oh, they're going to decide they're going to burn her. So both Brendan and Stephen pick Teresa up and put her into the fire. Right? Put her into the fire. And then they take the RAV4 and they drive it down to the pit. All at the same time, we mustn't forget that Jody, Stephen's fiance, rings him up twice and talks to Stephen for 15 minutes. And Stephen remains calm, talking about chit-chat. Big Jeff, do you have a comment?
In the Michael Kelly interview, which happens where
Yes.
Brendan elaborates upon his confession, Brendan draws pictures of what he saw.
Yes.
The pictures that he draws of Teresa chained to the bed.
Yes.
He draws the links of the chains. The picture that he draws of putting Teresa on the fire. There is no physical evidence that corroborates a single thing that he said. There are no marks on Stephen's bedpost. They have those pictures. As a matter of fact, the bones that we found, as you've analyzed in several of your presentations, have cut marks on them. But yet he draws a picture of a whole body going into the fire. So there's just no corroboration at all of anything that he has said in that confession. It's just dumb.
Yeah, Holly C., do you have a comment?
Yeah, I'm just gonna on that. Brendan writes out a statement that does not have that in there with O'Kelly, and he is one of my most hated people in this whole thing. Because he says, "Is that the truth?" And Brendan says, "Yeah." He says, "No, it's not the truth because she's not in it." Now I want you to draw a picture of her on the bed. He makes him draw that. So Brendan just following orders.
Yeah.
And not only that, if you read O'Kelly's statements, one thing that really irritates me about this man is that he says that he found out Brendan was hit on the head with a wooden spoon as a child for punishment. And so his idea is to have the wooden spoon laying out so that Brendan can see it. And that, I mean, this guy really, and then as soon as the interview's over, the first person he calls is is the cat, Lynn I can't even say his name. I'm so
Kaczynski.
Yeah. And then,
Meow.
Then he called straight Fassbender and says, "Oh, Brendan wants to talk to you tomorrow." So
That's
yes, he was
correct.
an agent of the state. He was not working in Brendan's interest. He made him draw those drawings. Otherwise, Brendan would have never done that.
Correct. And if I could, Bibi, do you have a comment?
Well, and the poor kid, first of all, he thought that the cops are supposed to help you. and
Yes.
and then you would assume, even being 16 years old and with a learning disability, that if it's your lawyer who's going to work for you, that you
Correct.
could trust them too.
Yes. Remarkably, and this is what blew my mind, both Kaczynski and O'Kelly were not working for Brendan. They were actually working for the state. And their logic was that Stephen, Uncle Stephen, he's the devil incarnate, and they've actually said that several times. He forced my client to do these things. So hence what they were trying to do is do a plea bargain. So they never actually assumed that Brendan was innocent. They assumed that he was guilty. And so what they were trying to do is spin the story to get Brendan to confess. Holly C., do you have a comment?
Yes, he does. Even in that video, he tells him, "Now, I want you to testify against Stephen." He tells him
Yes.
that. And the
Yes.
other sad thing is that doesn't Brendan go before the judge to request a new attorney because they thought he was
Yes.
guilty before all of this ever took place, before
Well,
O'Kelly ever got a hold of him?
the whole time, Stephen Avery is when he talks to Jody or Dolores or Barbara, he tells them all, have Brendan get a new attorney, get him a new attorney, and Barb never does it.
Yes. Yes, and we'll actually go into that. But as you can see, guys, this is a terrible strategy and tragedy for Brendan. Now, if we just look at slide 100, this is what I want to make a comment on. And you can contrast the day before when he was smiling like a Cheshire cat. Have a look at the mush on Ken Kratz. In my opinion, he's taken on the role as a father, and that Teresa Halbach is his daughter, and he's reacting in this horrendous manner, that this horrible crime had occurred against Teresa Halbach. Now, remember, this is all based on Brendan Dassey's confession or coerced confession. There wasn't one shred of evidence for anything that Brendan was saying, right? And so instead of checking to make sure that what Brendan was telling them was indeed of substance, of value, he decided to pull this stunt on the March 2nd press conference, in which he basically spelt out in detail what Stephen and Brendan apparently had done to Teresa Halbach. That would have terrified everyone. That would have horrified everyone. In an actual fact, my understanding was that they were trying to pass a law to bring back the electric chair, capital punishment. People were so outraged at what had happened. And there was no forensic evidence for any of these crimes that took place. Let me tell you this before I ask for comments. Ken Kratz, in his book, said one thing that he regretted doing, only one, and that was the March the 2nd press conference. Everything else, he has no regrets. So, he now realizes how bad that press conference was. And if you want a fair trial, that's not the way to do it. Okay? Horrendous. Guys, do we have any comments?
Why do we have all these photos of Cuss Road, the deer camp? Why is Wiegert and Fassbender's telling Stephen, we know the car came in through there?
Yes.
Why is Andrew Colborn stating Teresa Halbach west of Avery's?
Yes.
Why do they hide the fact that they were on Cuss Road, and in the reports they say they're on Jambo Creek?
Yes.
They went to so many links to hide what actually happened.
There's no question about it that it was hidden, suppressed. and everyone shut shop, because if anyone was going to question what happened at the deer camp Cuss Road, the whole thing would have blown to pieces, because we've now got a major event taking place off the Avery salvage yard, and that was not good. Bibi, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I'd just like to point out that there has been many law professors that have stepped up and said how wrong this was of Ken Kratz to put on that press conference and to tell the things that he told. So
Yes.
basically, it's an example for law professors on how not to handle a case.
Correct. And also the other thing is, before Big Jeff's comment, was that now they use Brendan's confession as not how to do a solicit or question a young person. So
Right, yes.
it's remarkable that Ken Kratz damaged the law profession by doing that March the 2nd press conference, and the investigators damage the way they can ask questions to a young, vulnerable child. Big Jeff, do you have a comment?
I do. My comment is there was a recent tweet by Mark Hodnott, who is an Australian who's a very strong supporter of Stephen and Brendan.
Yes.
And his tweet is in relation to the press conference. An enormous percentage of the jury pool who was polled whether or not, before the trial started, whether they thought Stephen was guilty or not.
Yes.
I think all but one said that they thought he was guilty going in. So
That's
when the
correct.
judges say, "Oh, how could the press conferences have possibly have poisoned the entire state to impress the jury pool?" Well, it did. The combination of the news coverage, which was inflamed by this press conference, if only one person, only one prospective juror said they didn't think that he was guilty. Come on, right? Let's do some math here.
Yeah, correct. Guys, you can't have you can't have your own personal press conference whenever you feel like it and spill the beans. This is what happened to Teresa Halbach, and you don't have a shred of evidence to do so. And like I said, that was the only thing that Ken Kratz regretted doing, which is pretty remarkable when you think about it. But you're right. That was very, very damaging. And so you had a situation whereby poor Brendan was not properly represented by his attorneys. And if you have a look at Michael O'Kelly basically set up the interview form, and this is highlighting what Holly C said, that my client is guilty. And so when Brendan wrote the very first statement in the self-interview form, they basically said, Mike O'Kelly looked at it and said, "This is not right. I can't help you." "What do you mean you can't help me?" "I could only help you if you admit that you're guilty." So in other words, the whole scenario was set up that Brendan had to confess that he had done all of these things to Teresa Halbach, because one of the questions was, "Do you feel sorry for what you did?" And Brendan goes, "But I haven't done anything. I only went there because of the fire." Mike O'Kelly was having none of that. So what Brendan did was he slowly went around, wrote what he wanted to hear, drew what he wanted to see, and then, of course, as Holly C mentioned, he's having a great time, Mike O'Kelly. Rings up Kaczynski, rings up Fassbender. He's done the job for the state. Big Jeff.
That interview, and I think we're going to have to do a read on the text of that interview. Brendan's actually almost negotiating with O'Kelly. What if I just admit to this? How long do you think I'll get?
Yeah.
Right, because he tells him you're going to go if you don't do this, you're going to go away for life. What if I only say this? How much time? It's just amazing.
It's clear. It's clear from the beginning that they're working on a plea deal. Right? Uncle Steve, the nasty Uncle Steve, he coerced my client. He made him do all these things. Let's hope he can get out in 20. Right? And that's how they actually worked through that. They never represented him as an innocent man. And as a consequence, they came in at the wrong angle. And you can clearly see later on that when Kaczynski and O'Kelly were sacked, oh boy, did that make things really bad for Ken Kratz, because now he didn't have allies that he could easily negotiate with. And it's remarkable if you read Ken Kratz's book, you could see that they were trying to come up with this plea deal, right, to get him out after 20 years or wherever it was. That there was no question in his mind that Brendan had done all these things, right? That he was a guilty person. Guys, let's leave that disaster of a press conference and have a look at page 101, because I'm sensitive of the time here, guys. We don't want to go too far. You can see the tragedy here. He's a young, innocent kid. All he wants to do is play video games. He's not interested in the big things in the world. And look at the way he's portrayed in the media. It looks like some psychotic, murderous killer. The guy's dazed and confused. He had no idea. And so when he was being interrogated by Fassbender and Wiegert, the amazing thing is he thought he was going to go to prison for a day. A day. Right? He had no concept that he was going to be arrested and put in prison for life. Because I actually said to Wiegert, am I going to make it back to my class? Am I going to be able to watch the wrestling? Right? So in his mind, he had no concept of the severity of what was happening around him and to him. Guys, do we have any comments? Are we happy with that? Holly C.
I think at the end of that, remember when he tells Barb, he said, what if Stephen's statement is different than mine? And I kind of wondered if he didn't expect Stephen to say that, Stephen to clean it up for him and say, the kid wasn't, this ain't true, and Brendan would just be absolved from it once Stephen said, that's not true. Like they weren't believing Brendan saying it's not true, but Stephen would say that didn't happen.
Yes, in actual fact, that terrified Brendan, because he even said to his mother, oh, I'm too scared to face him, because essentially Fassbender and Wiegert had convinced Brendan that Stephen was guilty, that Stephen had done these things. So Brendan's thinking, oh, okay, they must know the truth. Holly C.
At one point, and I don't remember when, that he says that the investigators were telling him that Stephen was trying to pin it on him and Bobby.
Yeah.
And it was almost like, well, I'm going to pin it on him, or, he couldn't understand why this was happening.
Yeah, it was basically either Stephen or Brendan. So that's why they encouraged Brendan to try and blame Stephen as much as possible. Billy, do you have a comment?
Well, Brendan has to even ask, like, what happens if my statements don't match what Stephen says?
Yep. Yes. Yes, and he was terrified to face his own uncle in a court of law, because the way Fassbender and Wiegert played this game was that they kept on telling Brendan, we know what happened. We know what happened. It's okay. Tell us. We want to know all these details. And all the major details of the crime did not come from Brendan. They came from the investigators themselves. And you've got your classic, who shot her in the head? That came straight from Wiegert. So a lot of this information was coming from the investigators. Holly C.
Dean Strang even actually said there was more evidence to prove that it didn't happen from what Brendan said than it did. There's more. It's just crazy.
Correct. It is completely crazy. But you see, the investigators had no choice. They had to go with the story because it was basically fill in the blanks. Because remember, all we have is a Toyota RAV4. And eventually, if you look at the crime lab, Billy, do you have a comment?
Well, right after they asked him about who shot her in the head, and he says,
yes,
Stephen did. So why didn't you say that? I couldn't think of it.
Correct. And the day after, which is remarkable, the search team goes back in, and lo and behold, they find 2 bullet fragments. including the infamous item FL. And again, guys, I've done a presentation on item FL, and it's definitely worth having a look because, as it turned out, that turned out to be more problematic for the state because Zellner and her experts actually got a hand on item FL and completely destroyed it. BB, do you have a comment?
Well, and on what Mobley said, not only couldn't he remember her being shot and couldn't think of it, but then he takes it to shot 10 or 11 times.
Correct.
So
Correct.
it's not just shot once or twice. Then
Yes.
it's 11. So then we got giant overkill going the other way. Then when he swings all the way over. You know.
Correct. Yep. Correct. There's no question about it. It's a massive overkill. Yes.
In a garage like that, can you imagine being in a garage like that? Which they're doing all this cutting up, so the door is probably shut. Hearing the gun go off 11 times, but yet,
Yes.
I couldn't think of that.
Yes. And not only that, nobody else heard any gunshot going off in the salvage yard, especially with the echo in the garage. No, none of that. And we have to then refer to the evidence of the actual owner of the gun, Johnson. And it's amazing how in court, when they question him, he just went to town. He goes, I've shot thousands of rounds all around the garage, and that he never picked up the brass shells. So wherever they flew, that's where he left them. And the amazing thing is, it's likely that from discharging of his weapon, shells went flying into the garage. That's probably what happened, right? And when Zellner's experts examined item FL, oh my lord, there was no proof that it hit bone. None whatsoever. There were no bone shards. There was no chemical presence of bone. But what they did find was wood, right? So when King Kratz was questioned about this, he goes, oh yeah, that bullet never hit skull. It went through her. So he could never admit that he was wrong, right? So he always kept on coming up with horrendous excuses. But this is what, guys, gives me a lot of faith because Kathleen Zellner's got it all written in her filing. It's all there. She just needs to get in front of a judge, and it's going to be very, very bad. Okay, so guys, what we'll have a look is slide 102. I like to finish soon, guys, because it's heading 1 o'clock in the morning over here.
Yeah, bedtime.
Yeah, I know. But if we have a look at slide 102, you can see that everyone was on show. All the big boys were there to look at Brendan's initial appearance in court on March the 3rd. And you can see they were all there. They were watching on. And you can see the look on Barb's face. She knows. She knows it's going to be really bad for her son. And what you can see here, which is very tragic, is the simple isolation of Brendan by himself, in handcuffs, in prison, but he's got no idea what's just happened to him. And the amazing, Millbilly, do you have a comment?
Well, when they talked to Mike Halbach outside the courtroom,
yes,
they asked him about the interrogation, and he states, well, all you have to do is pop that tape in a VCR and watch it, and it'll speak for itself. The reporter then asks him, well, have you seen it? And he says, no.
Yeah, of course not. Of course not. No, probably nobody would have seen it at that stage. But yes, it is interesting. But I must admit, when you have a false confession, oh boy, it's very hard to come back from that. But forensically, they could not prove that anything that Brendan had said to them actually had taken place. And as we do our podcast, we will examine all of that evidence. Now, let's move to slide 103. We'll finish pretty soon. And this is Brendan's initial appearance in front of Judge Fox. And Ralph, I can't even say his surname, was Brendan's appointing lawyer. And it's remarkable that he actually had to excuse himself because he had discovered that he was a long-lost cousin of Teresa. Am I out of line here? Is that correct?
I'd forgotten about that until now.
Yes. Yes.
Yep.
Yes. The actual lawyer, Ralph, had to excuse himself because he discovered he was a long lost relative or a distant cousin of Teresa Halbach. So he had to excuse himself. And if you remember in Ma'am, that's when Barb rang up her brother and said, I need $100,000 to get a new lawyer, because now Ralph had excused himself in front of the judge. All right, guys. So again, another form of disaster for poor Brendan. And guys, we're nearly finished. If we have a look at slide 104, you can see things went from bad to worse. Now, in effect, Stephen Avery, he was the poster boy for the Innocence Project. He was the representative, a sign that things were going well, that he proved his innocence through the DNA. He was the poster boy. He was on the website. However, when he got arrested, the Innocence Project took his picture off, because now, instead of being a good guy, he was a liability. And it's remarkable that they praised him so much, Stephen, when he was initially falsely imprisoned and he was released with the DNA evidence. Oh, everything went well. The moment he got arrested, they all dumped him like a hot potato. Instead of standing by him and say, whoa, let's wait till the trial's over. Nope. They distanced themselves from him. Guys, do we have any comments?
I have a comment on the last slide. Yes. To Jerome Fox.
Yes.
He's the one that signs off on every single search warrant.
Yes.
And they went to his house to do it.
Yes, I did. Yes. Yes, they did. Yeah, so he is the judge now, listening to the early information about Brendan's case, and it's not looking good. Millbilly.
Another tidbit, he was also at one time the Tadich family attorney.
Yes. The connections are very, very frightening. That is for sure. Now, if we have a look at slide 105, let me read it out for our listeners. Brendan gave his first statement to investigators 4 months earlier, the day after Teresa's RAV4 was found. He told them he had no contact with Teresa and had no knowledge of what happened to her. And that's that famous interview he did in the car with O'Neill. And that's when Skalinsky went up to O'Neill, got him out of the car and said, we have a bus driver who saw a female photographer taking pictures. And it turned out that the bus driver herself got the wrong day, got the wrong week, and probably got the wrong month. And what's frustrating is that Ken Kratz knew this, because Ken Kratz was able to work out when Teresa Halbach was actually on the Avery salvage yard taking photographs of vehicles. Clearly, what had happened was the bus driver had got the wrong date. But unfortunately, because of Brendan's vulnerabilities, he was able to change and adapt his story because of what the bus driver had apparently seen. Millbilly, do you have a comment?
Well, there's multiple instances where people's statements are happening on the wrong days.
Yes. Yes.
You take Robert Fabian. Earl Avery. Everybody that they initially talked to first, they all state the same things happening, but they're all stating different days.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, look, a proper chronology needs to be done. That is for sure. No question about it. But I don't know about you, Millbilly, but I'm very cautious about witness testimony statements because dates, times, events can be very, very wrong. You think about the bus driver. The bus driver admitted in court that she got everything wrong. However, that information was used against Brendan very early on. Now, here's the other kicker. Skolinski, the day before, interviews Blaine with his mum at the hotel. And Blaine tells him, hey, look, I just got off the bus with my brother. We walked home. We saw nothing. So Blaine did not change his story at all. Lily, do you have a comment?
Well, just real quick. Why on Saturday was it noon, 1 o'clock? Kratz was on scene at the salvage yard.
Yes.
It's not heard of very often at all that the DA would show up at the scene. Anybody have any insight into that?
Well, it's not just him. It's 3 different district attorneys show up.
Correct.
Oh, I wasn't even aware of that.
Oh, yeah. Rora was there. Yep.
Greaseback was
what?
there.
The
Yes.
scene of what? That's my question. The scene of a
Yes.
discovery
Well, yeah,
of a
true.
possible piece of evidence in a missing person case.
Yes. I believe the FBI was there as well. The rescue team was there where they were looking into the lake. Oh, yeah, they're all there. And because remember, they kept a record of who was coming in and who was coming out. There's a huge number of people that were on that place. Yeah, the fire brigade people were there. The whole place was invaded, essentially. BB, do you have a comment?
They kept somewhat of a record because some places there's people not signed in, signing out, people signing in, not signing out. So
Correct. And
shoddy work like always.
There's also 2 different logs. There's a civilian log and law enforcement log.
Yes.
But we have civilians signing in on the officer's log.
So. Yes. And don't forget, Ryan Hilligus was on the site as well.
I was going to say under real and assumed names.
Yeah, he called himself Killigus. Was it Killigus?
Killigus, yeah.
Yeah, Killigus, which is rather ironic, actually. Millbilly, do you have a comment?
Well, that's the thing. We don't know if they actually wrote their names down or if the officer that was in charge of the checkpoint may have wrote the name.
Yes, good point. Yeah, good point. In some situations, Millbilly, they actually wrote their own name because you can see the different writing style. But in other cases, you have one person writing people in, writing people out. Yes, I agree with you. I agree with you. All right, guys. So I think what we'll do, we'll make slide 106 the last one because we've gone on for 2 hours, which is rather remarkable because, well, everyone's talking and everyone's putting their own ideas. Look, clearly, it doesn't affect just one person when a person gets arrested. Now you can see here the look at this. Jody's obviously come in. I'm not sure whether it was to see Stephen or whatever, because remember she was in prison for DUI charges. And look at this. A reporter shoves a microphone straight in her face. Now, remember, she is the fiance of an accused murderer. So, all of a sudden, she too became a center of attention and also as a target, as we'll see later on when we get talks to her. Guys, do we have any final comments? Millbilly, do you have a comment?
You have that audio clip of Jody talking about how the investigators show up and they're going to show her pictures of a body.
Of a body, correct.
I believe their intentions were to get her to say that Stephen told her he did it.
Yep.
And then she refused to talk. So they took his alibi and made him accomplice.
Yep. Yes. Now, look, even though 2008 photographs have been released, there's a whole stack more. The ones that I want to see are H1 and H2, where Kaczynski actually measures body, dig site measurement. And Jody is the one that says, oh, they're going to show me pictures of a body. Did that actually mean a physical body or bones?
Well, that's another thing. We have that dispatch call of a guy calling in and say he just heard a vicious rumor.
Yes.
But a family member of the Halbach family heard over a police scanner.
Yes.
On the 7th that they found a body.
Yeah. Yep.
Why are they request? I mean, we could go on this all day, but yeah.
Yes, we can. We can. And Millbilly will no doubt have a look at the events of Cuss Road later on, because remember when Ken Kratz talked to who did he ask? Colburn about the burial site. Colburn just said, nope, nothing to see here, guys, and that's it. They shut down Cuss Road just like that. A stump. It was a tree stump. Yet
but
we've seen. Yes.
Why do we have two officers writing the same notes?
Mm-hmm.
Why are they restaging Cuss Road?
Yep, that's a very good question.
The red pen note. The one's written in the red pen. Yeah.
No, it's red pen and black pen. Two officers.
Oh, okay.
One is Bushman. The other one is Seigel.
Right.
Do we know who the red pen was?
Yeah, it's right there on the front page of it.
Oh, okay.
Right.
That photo of the red ink, that's the back page of the front page. There's also another page in those photos with the same handwriting, and it's the same person.
Yep. Look, guys, we'll end the podcast here, because I think if we talk about Cuss Road, we can spend 5 hours on Cuss Road, and we will talk about Cuss Road. But guys, are there any parting comments about our podcast for today? I mean, clearly, guys, what we're doing is we're laying down the foundation of the forensic evidence that's going to come up. And so we're looking at the trial. We're nearly finished that. And then the evidence as it was collected, and we'll be discussing all of that. So, guys, are there any comments, quick comments? Big Jeff, a quick comment.
Our friend Attorney Fallon said innocent people don't confess. Okay.
Yes.
So I will say right now that people who have nothing to hide don't keep evidence locked away from the general public.
That's correct. That's correct. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. The amount of irony going on here is ridiculous. Millbilly, do you have a quick comment?
They're not only keeping evidence away from the public, they're withholding evidence from his attorney.
Correct.
They pulled the bamboozle on him. As she's talking with the state, agreeing to test these items.
Yes.
Sukowicz comes in and denies everything.
Correct. Correct. It is complete obfuscation. They don't want her anywhere near the evidence. Holly C., a quick comment.
Mine is just about Brendan and something, he says that he was told to be home. Barb had called, said he needed to be home by 10.
That's correct. Yes.
He says he goes home and speaks to Barb and then goes to bed. Stephen says he talks to Jody because she calls at 9. And we know that Brendan seen Barb before 9 because Barb didn't leave those jailhouse calls. Barb didn't leave until about 9:20. So I think Brendan was at home at 9:20.
She left at 9:07.
Right.
Okay. Well, I think
Stephen's on the phone with Jody, and he says, "Oh, there she goes again."
That's right. That's correct.
And then Stephen also makes the remark that when he went over by Barb's and talked to her, she made the comment like, "Oh, I see you did the dishes," and talking to Brendan because Barb did them. Brendan was supposed to.
Yes.
And Stephen's making a joke about it.
Yes. Yes. I mean, when you think about it, the entire murder scenario just doesn't make any sense. Timing wise, everything is screwed up.
Because it didn't happen.
That's correct. That's correct. Everything makes sense if you think that no murder took place. If you think a murder did take place, then you've got all sorts of timing issues. You've got 1,000,001 complications. And someone had made the comment that Brendan drew a whole body that was placed in the fire. We know from the examination of the bones, they were sawed with fine blade cuts. And guess what? Brendan never mentions the fact that the body was cut up, right? They got it by the hands and the feet, apparently, and threw it onto the fire. And then, believe it or not, Ken Kratz was saying, well, the mutilation of the corpse came because he had a shovel. I've never seen a shovel do a fine blade saw cut, including curve saw cuts. And I remember Dr. Symes or Professor Symes had a picture, I've never seen it before, in which it had a hesitation cut mark, which means that the cut, they started doing a cut, then stopped. But you can see the narrow groove of a fine blade, like a hacksaw. So the body was cut up. No question about that. So Brendan never mentioned that because it didn't happen. So if you get in your minds that this event did not happen, it all makes perfect sense. Forensically, nothing occurred in that trailer. Nothing occurred in the garage. And that's what baffled the investigators. And that's why we get, and we'll stop with this, made the remark, the final remark, well, they had 5 days to clean up. He said that right at the end. Guys, are we happy to leave and finish the podcast for tonight?
Yep.
Beautiful. Yep, fantastic. Guys, all of us, the panel, would like to thank the audience. And again, guys, thank you very much for your support. Like I said, we take it casually on the podcast. Thank you very much for your subscription and your support. Please write down the questions. We will go through them all. And Lily is taking note of them, and we'll try and answer them as quickly as we can. So, guys, a big thank you very much for staying with us. We appreciate your support. So that's a good night from me. And guys,
yep. Enjoy your Sunday. Enjoy your Sunday.
Beautiful.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, guys. Take care, and we'll all see you next week.